Greetings, everyone. This will be a live reading of the first episode of my Sword and Sorcery book, AMOK the Powerful. It will be a live reading, meaning warts and all. I haven't done this in a little while, so hopefully I can get through the entire episode without screwing up too many times. But anyways, that's what live readings are all about, and that's what's exciting about them. So here we go. AMOK the Powerful by Draven. Episode 1. Evil Soul, Evil Deed. AMOK's fist landed on the rogue's nose and shattered it with a hearty crunch. He swung again, this time elbowing the attacker who'd come from behind in the jaw. 2 down, 2 to go, he thought to himself. The third one leaped at him with outstretched arms, only to get caught and have AMOK lift him up and throw him like a rag doll against the tavern wall. Last to go. I hope you're more of a challenge than your pals. I hardly broke a sweat handling the lot of you, AMOK said to the last man standing. The man pulled a dagger from underneath his furs. I'm gonna cut you good, barbarian. You're welcome to try, big man. With these words, AMOK didn't wait for his foe to attack. He charged at him like a bull, tackling him and crushing a few of the man's ribs in the process. The 8-inch dagger fell to the snowy earth almost at the same time as the vile man's head made a loud thud as it hit the ground. The blow knocked him unconscious. AMOK had done all this without even drawing his sword from its baldric. He got up and looked over his shoulder just in time to see the other 3 men run off into the night, abandoning their inert friend. AMOK shook his head. No loyalty among scoundrels. Thank you, a feeble voice said from a dark corner of the alley behind the tavern. AMOK removed the fallen foe's furs and walked up to the half-naked woman curled up against the wall. Her shoulder-length midnight black hair hid half of her face. Here, put this over your shoulders or you'll catch your death. I don't know what would have happened to me if you hadn't arrived when you did, she said, her voice still shaking. The important thing is that you're safe now, he said. He managed to get a faint smile out of her. He helped her get to her feet. Is he dead? She asked, staring at the prone, now bare-chested figure on the icy ground. Unfortunately not. He would deserve it, though. They all would. But alas, I don't kill unless I'm paid to. Or if my life's in danger. But there were 4 of them against you. Yes, but my life was never in peril. AMOK sported a mane of unnatural crimson-red hair and was taller than most men. His chiseled features resembled a sculpture made out of rock. I seem to have a knack for attracting the worst kind of men, she said. AMOK looked up at the sign ahead of them and pointed to it. What do you expect if you hang around a tavern? Alehouses are breeding grounds for thieves, murderers, and rapists. What were you doing out here by yourself? Are you working? Her face contorted at the illusion. I'll have you know that I'm a very respectable lady, she said. AMOK cracked a smile and threw his hands up in an apologetic fashion. I didn't mean to offend you, my lady. And what sort of men are you, coming to this tavern? He chuckled. I'm just here to have a few pints, my lady. I'm Lanka, by the way. AMOK. Pleased to meet you, AMOK. He nodded. Are you cold? I was thirsty enough before I came to your rescue, but now I'm parched. I can hear the ale calling me beyond those walls. Let me buy you a couple of pints, then. It's the least I can do after what you did for me. After you, AMOK said, motioning toward the other end of the alley. I'm not sure if it's the kind of place for a lady with the jolly bunch who frequents these types of establishments, as you said. You'll be with me. No one will even dare look at you the wrong way. She smiled. What about him? She asked, pointing to the still unconscious rogue. He'll wake up soon enough. And with these words, AMOK took Lanka's hand and led the way. The raunchy tavern reeked of spilled beer. It buzzed with the chatter of the many patrons who took part in the joys of alcohol consumption. Chandeliers on the ceiling lit the square room, and a candle sat on each table. AMOK and Lanka went down 4 steps and proceeded to an empty table by one of the windows. AMOK looked at his surroundings. A bald, middle-aged man who wore an eye patch stared at him for a moment before returning his attention to his beer. I'll have 1 drink with you and then I'll be off, Lanka said. Where will you be off to? It's dangerous to be wandering alone in these parts late at night, AMOK said. So I've seen. I'll be all right. My horse will get me to where I'm going fast. I left it on the other side of this alehouse. The black horse with the white spots? She nodded. I left it in good company, next to a beautiful white stallion. Melrick, Amok said. What? The stallion. He's mine. His name is Melrick, Amok said. You're lucky to have such a magnificent steed. The barkeeper came to take their orders. She asked for a dandelion wine, and he ordered a large pint of red ale. The barkeep returned a few minutes later with their drinks, and not 1 but 2 pints for Amok. The fellow over there offered to buy you an extra ale, the barkeep said. Amok turned to look at his benefactor, only to realize that it was the man with the eye patch raising his glass to him before drinking. Do you know this man? Lenka asked. No. Well, he seems to know you. He's coming over, Lenka said. Amok grimaced. Pardon the interruption, but are you the one they call Amok? The man asked, standing next to their table. He wore expensive furs. It depends. Who wants to know? Amok said. The man eyed Lenka for a moment. Would you mind giving us a few minutes, wench? Only if Amok wants to talk to you, Lenka said, a look of authority on her face. She and I were having a conversation. What makes you think I have anything to say to you? Amok said, staring the man dead in the eye. Well, if you're who I think you are, you'll be interested in my offer. Apologies for intruding, but I don't think it's the kind of business the lady will care to hear about. It's fine, I wasn't going to stay much longer anyway, Lenka said. I'll go to the bar to finish my drink and I'll be on my way. I've paid you back what I said I would. Amok nodded. If you're okay with it, then it's fine by me. Thank you, Amok said. Thank you too. Lenka smiled as she got up and headed for the bar without even giving the man with the eye patch a second glance. The one-eyed man took Lenka's seat and sat across from Amok. She's got curves, but with your physique, you can do much better, he said as he ogled her ass while she walked away. Mind your tongue. You have until I'm done draining these 2 pints to pique my interest. After that, I'm leaving, Amok stated as he took a big swig of the red ale. The man flashed him a white grin. I'll get right to the point then. My name is Crandor. I'm a wealthy man and my word is my bond. I've earned a spotless reputation when it comes to business. At this, Amok downed the rest of his pint and slammed it on the table, wiping his lips. He'd heard this kind of rhetoric countless times before and didn't care for it. The man lost his smile and knew that his next words had to hit the bullseye, otherwise he'd lose Amok. Word around town is that you're the best mercenary in these parts. I have an assignment for you, the man said, producing a small rectangular box out of his furs and setting it on the table. Open it, he said as he pushed it across toward Amok. Amok eyed the box for a few seconds before curiosity got the best of him. He opened it, and what lay inside glittered in the candlelight. How much is in here? Amok asked. 100 bellas, and that's only half of what I'll pay you. You'll get the other half when you bring me back what was stolen from me. That's no small pile of coin, Amok said, raising an eyebrow in suspicion. He took a sip of his second pint. What was stolen? A very special sword, a family heirloom. Crandor pulled out a folded parchment from the inside breast pocket of his furs. He displayed it on the table. I don't think I've seen a sword quite like this before. It's long and very slender, Amok said. Yes, it's a very rare sword that's been in my family for generations and has great sentimental value. It was stolen from me a week ago. I have it on good authority that a small band of ninjas led by a Ronin are hiding out in the valley, waiting for the snow to melt to resume their trip and head back to their homeland. Winter's almost over. A few more weeks, and they'll be gone forever, and so will my sword. Amok took another swallow before speaking. What are a ninja and a Ronin? Ninja and Ronin. A Ronin is a masterless samurai. Samurai are Japanese warriors. Ninjas are assassins that are beneath the honor of the samurai. All you need to know is that you'll be facing 4 expertly trained assassins. Here's a map of where my spies have last seen them and where they believe they are hiding. Crandor handed Amok a map with a detailed route to take from town to get to his destination. And your spies couldn't retrieve your sword for you? Crandor shook his head. They aren't warriors. I've asked around who the best warrior and mercenary is in these parts, and the name that kept coming up was AMOK. You might be young, but your reputation precedes you, my friend. I need to have my sword back as soon as possible. It's clear to me that you're the only man for the job. What about sorcery? Do these ninjas have magic powers? I want to know what I'm up against. Figure out whether I should bring a friend along who dabbles in that sort of thing. No, nothing like that. Just hand-to-hand combat. And some sword fighting should be enough. Are you planning to go alone? It's only 4 men, and they aren't worth splitting my share with anyone. A man who lives up to his reputation. Amok rubbed his stubby chin. I'll do it. He shut the box's lid and grabbed it. How do I get in touch with you when I'm done? The smile had returned on Crandor's wrinkled face. Just get the word to the barkeep that you want to see me, and I'll meet you the next day at your convenience. Fine, Amok said, downing the rest of his pint as he picked up the bellas. He got up. That's it? You're leaving? Crandor asked. Is there anything else I need to know? No, that's the gist of it. You're not much for conversation, are you? Why waste time talking? Action is what counts. When do you think you'll have a go at it? Tomorrow. That soon? Would you rather I wait? Besides, once the snow melts and winter's over, I'll be leaving this forsaken place as well. Crandor nodded. He extended a hand, Amok shook it, and was on his way out without even thanking the man for the job he'd given him. He looked around the bar for Lanka, but she was nowhere to be found. No matter. Maybe their paths would cross again sometime. Amok left the tavern and hopped on Melric. The snow had started falling again, and the temperature was dropping fast. They rode out into the black night and headed for his hut at the edge of town. He'd go to sleep early because he'd have a big day ahead of him tomorrow. Amok dreamed again. It was always the same recurring dream. A Stygian black crystal kingdom, cloaked figures darting across torchlit hallways, and big white owls hovering around. He felt drawn to it. His intuition told him that it was a real place and that it was out west. Dawn came too early, and the sun blinded Amok's eyes as he awoke from his slumber. He yawned and stretched as he walked up to the frosted window. It had snowed all night, but it seemed to have stopped now. He tossed a log into the fireplace to keep the fire alive. He sat at his small wooden table and ate breakfast. He lived in a modest one-room cabin surrounded by dream catchers. It wasn't much, but it was cozy, relatively warm in winter, and it was all his, meaning he didn't have to pay rent to anyone. He lived his life a free man, did what he wanted, when he wanted, with who he wanted, and to him, that was priceless. He had many questions about his past, though, and he intended to do something about that very soon. He slid on his chainmail vest and put on as many furs as he could for his trip to the valley. It would be much colder out there, given the strong gales and blowing snow. He sharpened his sword before sheathing it into its scabbard. He filled a backpack with a thick blanket and provisions, and then slid on his gauntlet, which was covered with metal plates on his left hand. He was right-handed and swung his sword with his right hand. The gauntlet on his left hand had the dual role of shielding him from blows when he took part in sword fights, and to pack a wallop when he punched an enemy. Then he exited his warm lodging to brave the cold winter outside. He petted his horse before mounting him. Are you ready for another adventure, Melric? The stallion neighed in response to his master. They had about 8 hours' worth of riding ahead of them on a trek that would take them to late afternoon and close to sundown until they reached the ninja's lair. Amok lived at the edge of town in Zebulon, so it didn't take him long to be in the uninhabited wilderness. Save for a few boulders, bushes, and trees, it was bare land as far as the eye could see. They'd been riding for about 2 hours before the warm sun started playing hide-and-seek with the clouds, to eventually disappear for good. Snow began falling from the gray skies above, snowflakes of all shapes and sizes. Great. Just what I needed, Amok said under his breath. They went on for a couple of hours more before stopping under a 60-feet-high snow-covered tree for a bite to eat. Amok gave Melric a good half hour to rest and to feed. Afterwards, they resumed their course. A few more hours went by under threatening dark skies, and Amok had almost fallen asleep while Melric kept trotting forward. Upon looking at the map, Amok realized that the ninja's cave should be coming up within an hour or so, if the map was accurate. The snow was unrelenting, and despite his imposing stature, Amok was frozen to the bone. He could feel Melric shivering as well. They'd have to find shelter if they didn't reach the ninja's den soon. 20 minutes went by when a cluster of large rocks and small caves came into view less than 100 paces ahead. At last, shelter from this icy hell, Amok thought out loud. Suddenly, the bear-head-shaped scar on his left pectoral over his heart began to burn. Amok scratched it over his furs, and then it started to itch. He did his best to ignore it. This wasn't the first time it happened, and every time it did, it was a foreboding for what would ensue in the following minutes. Amok perked up and put a hand on the hilt of his sword. A few minutes elapsed, and Melric stopped dead in his tracks. Amok leaned closer to the stallion's head and whispered, "What's the matter, boy? Something caught your attention?" The horse neighed. Through the dense snowfall, Amok perceived a massive shape moving forward toward him and Melric. Then he heard a loud growl that echoed throughout the valley. Amok gripped the hilt of his sword and pulled it out of its scabbard. He knew what awaited him amid the snow flurries and biting wind. Slowly, the shape took form, and it was just as Amok had feared. He wasn't afraid of much in this realm, but the creature that stood before him gave him the creeps. "Not you again!" Amok yelled a battle cry as he pulled on Melric's reins to propel him toward the giant white bear that towered less than 30 paces from them. They clashed as Amok swung his sword at the bear while it swatted at him with one of its oversized paws, grazing Amok's right shoulder in the process. Amok, on the other hand, had missed his target. "What do you want from me? Stop following me!" The hulking bear would show up at random on Amok's path on any given day or night. He'd always engage with it in a brutal battle until the bear would become bored and leave him alone. Amok was thankful he'd managed to survive their encounters thus far, but this time he was tired, cold, and brawling with a giant bear was the last thing he felt like doing today. He wanted to preserve his energy to fight the ninjas later on. Amok and Melric went in for a second go at him. As Melric galloped and was about to collide into the bear, Amok launched himself head-on at the bear and tackled it. The assault managed to knock the bear off his hind legs and it toppled to its right side. Amok's sword began to emit a purple hue. It would happen from time to time, but he had no control over it. Amok took advantage of this momentum to strike at the bear with his sword, repeatedly bashing it on its belly. The bear rumbled and struck back at Amok, missing him by a hair. As it tried getting back up, Amok hit it with a powerful kick with the sole of his boot, sending the beast back to the snow-covered ground. "Stay down and leave me be!" With lightning-fast velocity, the bear swung at Amok with both paws simultaneously as it bellowed in anger. The paws clawed through the furs and chainmail, and Amok felt his chest burn as the claws tore his flesh. He yelped in pain, and in a last-ditch attempt at taking his opponent down, Amok lunged at the bear with all his might. They rolled on the ground, wrestling for dominance. Amok hit the feral bear with his gauntlet, giving him all he had. For a few seconds, the bear wound up atop Amok, its massive weight nearly crushing him. He thought he was done for, until his trusty stallion came to his rescue, crashing into the bear and knocking it off Amok. "You're a brave horse, Melric," Amok shouted. He picked up his fallen, still glowing sword and thrust it into the bear's chest, just below its heart. The white giant howled in agony as Amok pulled the blade out of its bleeding wound. The bear got back to its usual posture on all fours and stared at Amok defiantly. Amok kept his gaze locked on the beast. This was a staring contest Amok had no intention of losing. They remained locked on one another for countless minutes until the bear rose on its hind legs and roared. Then he turned around and walked away. Amok let out a sigh of relief as he watched the colossal bear disappear amidst the blowing snow, leaving a trail of blood behind. His sword had stopped glowing. Melric came to Amok's side, neighing, and he petted him. "Thank you, my loyal friend. I doubt I'd still be standing and breathing were it not for you. Another confrontation with that beast is over, but I fear we haven't seen the last of him." Amok and Melric resumed their trek toward the ninja's hideout. It was dead quiet in the valley. Amok appreciated the stillness of nature after having gone through such a hard-fought battle. He heard and felt something zip by his left ear. His hackles went up. Another unidentified object flew by, missing his head by an inch. He pulled on Melric's reins to bring the stallion to a full stop. He freed his sword from its scabbard once more and got into position to retaliate. He glanced around up above in the valley to find the source of the attack. Another incoming object came straight at him, but this time he was able to deviate from its trajectory with a swing of his sword. The object landed a few paces in front of him. It was a 4-point, star-shaped steel object the size of an apple. A few seconds later, another one of those throwing stars flew at him, and this time he saw a shape move behind a tall rock to his left. He deflected it with his trusty sword and jumped off of Melric. AMOK started running as fast as the thick snow on the ground permitted and went straight for the shape who threw the steel stars at him. Another one sped towards him, and he dodged it by leaning to his right as he ran. He could see his assailant now, a man dressed all in white from head to toe, wearing a hood and face mask. AMOK leaped in the air, clasping his sword with both hands, swinging it wildly as he struck his aggressor. The man moved like a cat and barely avoided a fatal blow as he rolled on the ground, kicking the sword out of AMOK's hand in the process. "You must be one of those ninjas," AMOK yelled at him. The man sat in a crouched position and simply replied, "Hi!" as he flung 2 more throwing stars at AMOK. The first one didn't come close to hitting him, but the second one hit its mark, grazing his right calf. It only made him angrier and more determined to kill this sneaky ninja. AMOK hurtled towards him and collided head-on with the ninja, knocking the wind out of him and sending him to the ground. He began pummeling his face with both fists, as if it were a coconut he was trying to crack open. The ninja fought back, using his legs to propel AMOK over him and send him crashing against a bundle of rocks. AMOK immediately got back to his feet and shook the cobwebs off as he charged like a raging bull at his foe once more. The ninja took evasive action, somersaulting over AMOK and landing behind him, his back to him. In a fraction of a second, just as the ninja turned to face him, AMOK grabbed his sword on the ground, spun around, and brandished it at the ninja's throat. It caught the white-hooded figure by surprise, and before he had time to comprehend what was happening, his head flew from his shoulders and fell in the snow with a bloody red splash. The ninja's body toppled to the right, blood still spurting out of his neck like a fountain. AMOK wiped his sword in the snowy earth before sheathing it. He went to retrieve 3 of the ninja's throwing stars and tucked them under his belt. "These might come in handy later," he thought out loud. Melric came trotting and he mounted him, petting the stallion's mane. "If Crandor's spies are to be trusted, that's 1 down, 3 to go," he said, clenching his teeth. AMOK resumed his course and headed for the looming cave ahead. According to the map he'd been given, this should be the entrance to the ninja's lair. He rode forward for a few minutes, and when he arrived at about 50 paces from the cavern's entrance, he jumped off of Melric to continue the remainder of the way on foot. It didn't take long for another enemy to manifest himself. A second ninja. This one, dressed all in black and wielding a 6-feet-long staff made of hardwood, erupted from the blackness of the grotto. AMOK raised his sword and assumed the battle stance. This ninja was the polar opposite of the other quiet one. He charged at AMOK, yelling a war cry in a foreign language he couldn't decipher. AMOK retaliated with a roar of his own and struck his sword down hard at the incoming attack. The ninja's speed caught him by surprise, dodging left and right every attempt AMOK made at slicing him. He managed to hit AMOK 3 times on the arm, chin, and stomach, which sent the barbarian whirling back a few steps. "You're pretty good with that stick, but it's no match for my cold steel." AMOK came storming at the ninja, barely missing him as he leapt over him, striking him again from behind with his long staff. AMOK spun around just as the ninja pressed on the middle of his weapon to release a concealed dart from one of its extremities. It was AMOK's turn to duck to avoid getting stung by what he guessed might have been a poisonous dart. "Got a few tricks up your sleeve, don't you?" All he got as a reply were 4 harsh words in a foreign tongue. "Same to you," AMOK replied, half smiling. AMOK marched straight for him, his sword perpendicular to his body, making the sign of a cross with his gauntleted arm. The ninja took the bait and came rushing at him. AMOK blocked 2 staff hits and found a way to sneak in a quick hit smack into the ninja's throat with the hilt of his sword. The ninja started to choke and reached for his throat with his left hand, his right hand still holding his weapon. It gave AMOK time to grab the end of his nemesis' staff and pull it toward him. The ninja came along with it, and Amok greeted him with a solid punch right on the nose with his gauntlet. The ninja shrieked in pain, and as a reflex to getting hit, let go of his staff. Amok took hold of it and tossed it aside. As the ninja turned his head to look at his weapon getting discarded, Amok burrowed his sword deep inside the ninja's chest, right between his ribs. It jutted out the ninja's back as Amok lifted his sword, impaling the black-clad masked warrior in the process. He tossed him to the ground, pulled his sword out of him, and wiped his blade in the snow. 2 down, 2 to go, he said as he marched in the direction of the cave. He entered its dark mouth and kept going until he saw the flicker of torches on the walls, flanking him not too far ahead. He heard a chain rattling but saw no one. "Show yourself! I've bested your 2 pals. You're next!" Seemingly out of nowhere, a black shape materialized a few paces in front of him in the narrow tunnel of the cave. A chain flew at him, and before Amok could realize what was happening, it had wrapped itself around his ankles, tripping him backward to the ground. His sword slipped out of his hand while the ninja pulled Amok towards him. He finally caught a glimpse of his aggressor's weapon. The chain was attached to a steel handle with an iron sickle. The ninja swung the chain sickle in a lasso-like circle above his head, ready to clobber Amok. He felt the sense of urgency to avoid what could result in a fatal blow and leaped back to his feet, headbutting the ninja by the same token. He broke free from the chain's clutch and went straight for the ninja's weapon. They wrestled for control of it. This ninja was the strongest of the 3. Amok gripped him by the throat with his gauntlet hand as the ninja kneed him between the legs, sending Amok writhing in agony. He let go of the ninja's throat, and while a sharp pain made Amok double over, the ninja continued his onslaught with a strong kick to the face. Amok found himself kissing the ground once more. He could hear the chain sickle twirling over him as he tried to regain his composure. As the sickle was about to deliver the fatal blow, Amok rolled to the right and felt the sickle graze his back. He hurried to his feet and ran to retrieve his fallen sword. As Amok brandished his sword to clash with the ninja and his spinning sickle, the 2 men locked steel and found themselves mere inches from one another. In a sheer contest of strength, Amok had encountered very few people that could best him. Amok pulled on his sword, and it tore the chain sickle out of the ninja's hands, sending it flying toward the cave's wall. As Amok brought down his sword to finish off his opponent, in a last-ditch effort to shield himself from the blow, the ninja raised his left arm to protect his head. Amok's sword landed to sever the ninja's arm off with one swift strike. He bellowed as he dropped to his knees. Amok debated whether to take another swing and send his head rolling down the tunnel. Before he had time to make up his mind, the ninja produced a 7-inch double-edged dagger from his outfit. Amok took 2 steps back out of an abundance of caution. The ninja plunged the dagger into his belly and drew the blade from left to right, slicing his belly open. The deep cut severed the abdominal aorta, and it began to bleed profusely. He'd be dead in a few minutes. "A warrior with a code of honor. I can respect that," Amok said, as the ninja dropped face first in front of him in a pool of gathering blood. 3 down, 1 to go. Amok didn't bother sheathing his sword. He stomped onward as the tunnel slowly opened up to a larger chamber that looked like the clan's living quarters. At least, here he'd have more space to fight than in close quarters as he just did. Torches surrounded the oval-shaped cave with some logs burning in the middle of the room, lighting it well enough that Amok could see everything around him. It seemed as if there was no place to hide here. It had a high ceiling with a hole in it to let the smoke from the fire escape outside. An aroma of incense permeated the area. Amok's gaze stopped to focus on an object at the far right-hand side of the chamber. Resting on a stand was the Sander sword, about 2 feet in length, that he'd been tasked with retrieving. "This is almost too easy," Amok whispered to himself as he headed towards the sword. When he arrived about 10 paces from his goal, a man dressed in full crimson armor emerged from the dark recesses of the entire room. He held a very similar sword to the one in display and looked battle-ready. It startled Amok. "You must be my last target," Amok said. "The samurai." He said the word slowly, as if struggling to remember it. The man wore a helmet of sorts and body armor made of small pieces of metal put together with silk laces and leather. The samurai surprised him yet again and wielded his sword in a fast and furious manner. Amok reciprocated, and their blades clashed. The samurai spun around and rushed Amok, his sword colliding loudly against the red-haired colossus's steel, knocking it out of his hands to send it 20 paces to his left to finish its trajectory against the cave wall. What surprised Amok even more was what came next. "You must be a great warrior to have defeated my ninjas," the samurai said, standing still, his sword lowered. "You speak my tongue?" The samurai nodded. "I've spent many years traveling the world, and since it is a widespread language, I have developed a good command of it over the years." "I'm impressed. That doesn't change the fact that I'm going to kill you. Unless you'd be willing to hand me that shiny sword behind you without a fight?" The samurai laughed. "The Gaijin has a sense of humor." "Gaijin?" Amok replied. "Gaijin, you," the samurai said, pointing at Amok with his index finger. "You are a foreigner. White skin. Gaijin." Amok nodded. "The name's Amok, and I'm still gonna kill you." "I appreciate your fighting spirit. Tell me, Amok, before we resume our duel to the death, why is it that you want this katana so much?" "Katana? What's that?" "I'm here for the sword," Amok said, motioning at the stand with a nod of his head. "That sword is called a katana. It is a samurai sword, and this particular one is very rare." "So I've been told." "It is 200 years old. Do you have any grasp on how long that is?" "It's a couple of lifetimes." The samurai smiled behind his half-mask. "A samurai's katana is often considered to be a soul. If the katana is evil, the samurai wielding it will be tempted to take the path of evil as well. This katana was forged and belonged to a samurai named Muramasa. It is cursed, and it creates bloodlust in those who brandish it. My family has been keepers of it for the past 150 years. Our mission is to make sure it does not fall into the wrong hands." "If it's so evil, why not destroy it?" The samurai shook his head. "As I said, it is cursed. Attempting to destroy it would only risk wreaking havoc. I am just passing through these lands, and in a few days I will be gone, never to return. I am taking it somewhere safe, where no one will find it. Many have come seeking it over the decades, and I grow tired of fighting and killing in the name of this evil sword." "The one who hired me told me you'd stolen the sword from him, that it was a family heirloom." "And you believed him? Did you not investigate his claims before embarking on this quest?" Amok shook his head. "He paid me handsomely and will pay me even more when I bring it back to him." "So, you are doing this only for the reward?" "Why else? I already possess the only sword I could ever want or need. I have no use for this katana." "If you'll indulge me, who hired you?" "That's between me and him." The samurai nodded. "An honorable trait. Well, allow me to take a guess at your employer's name. Crandor." Amok remained silent. The samurai smiled once more. "Silence is consent. He has been tailing us ever since we arrived a few weeks ago. He knows how invaluable this katana is. He sent 12 spies, and we crushed every one of them, save for one who barely managed to get away but who surely succumbed to his wounds in the following days. He is a dangerous man with sinister purposes and dark allies serving a wicked master. If Crandor's master were to take possession of Muramasa's katana, there is no telling what evil he could unleash upon this world." Amok rubbed the stubble on his chin. "Your story does make sense, but it's your word against his." "True, but you strike me as a smart man, Amok. Someone who can be reasoned with. I do not believe you are a bad man. You are simply out to do an evil deed. You are a thief, plain and simple." Oh, I'm much more than a thief," Amok said, taking offense. "I do not know you well enough to tell, but I can make you a counteroffer that would make up for your time." Amok frowned. "What kind of counteroffer?" "Are you loyal to Crandor?" "I'm loyal to the bellas he gave me, and the other half I'll get when I deliver the katana to him. I couldn't care less about Crandor." "Could you be persuaded to do the right thing, then?" "Look, I've been listening to your tale, and it sounds genuine. If you're telling the truth, which I'm inclined to believe you are, it makes my job even more of a hassle. I don't like fighting people I have no animosity toward. Besides, you're a warrior and I respect that. As for Crandor, I don't like the man. Strikes me as lewd. But I'm a man of my word, and he paid me to get this sword for him. I took the payment, therefore I must fulfill my end of the bargain. I appreciate your line of thinking. I believe you are a good man, AMOK, and that if you are given a choice between doing a good deed and an evil deed, you will lean toward the good deed. Am I correct in my assumption? AMOK took a deep breath. You are. How much did he pay you? 100 bellas. 100 more when he gets the sword. The samurai whistled. That's a fair amount for such a job as this. How about I give you 200 bellas right now, and you turn around and just walk away? AMOK stared at him for a while. What do I do about the payment I already took? It's up to you. You either give it back to him and tell him you found out he lied and you don't want to work for him, or you keep it for your trouble. I like the second option better. The samurai laughed. Under different circumstances, I think you and I could have been friends, AMOK. Perhaps. What's your name anyway? Kobayashi. The samurai walked over to a chest, a few paces from where they had stood. He opened it and took out 2 bags. He tossed them at AMOK, who caught them both. AMOK peered inside and counted. 200 bellas. So, I'm just supposed to leave now? Well, you could thank me and then leave, the samurai said with a hint of amusement in his voice. AMOK smiled. I was looking forward to fighting you. Believe me, AMOK, the last thing you want to do is get into a duel with me. My ninjas are good, but even the 3 of them fighting me all at once could not vanquish me. You fought honorably, and even though you killed them, I will not seek revenge. Well, I didn't kill the last one. He did that to himself. He committed seppuku, suicide. He lost an arm in battle, and the dishonor was too great for him to bear. Kind of a harsh way to die, isn't it? Our customs are different from yours. I hold no grudge against you. You are free to go. And if you speak to Crandor again, tell him that if I cross paths with him ever again, I will kill him slowly and painfully. Will do. AMOK went to pick up his sword and sheathed it. He extended a hand for the samurai to shake. Instead of shaking it, Kobayashi bowed. AMOK understood the gesture and returned it. Then he was on his way, 200 bellas richer, and without the prize katana. He would sleep better tonight. A clear conscience makes the softest pillow. He retraced his steps out of the cave and climbed on Melrig's back. Thank you for waiting for me, valiant friend. Time to head back home. And with these words, as dusk was setting, AMOK and his brave stallion were homeward bound. The snow had stopped falling, and they stopped only twice on the way home to rest and eat. AMOK made it home in the middle of the night. AMOK fell into a dreamless sleep after the long day he'd had. He woke up the next day around noon and everything ached. His body was covered with bruises and cuts. He considered himself lucky to be alive after facing an oversized bear, 3 ninjas, and a samurai, even if the fight with the latter ended almost before it began. His lodgings felt icy cold, and he could see his breath as he exhaled. He threw another big log into the fireplace as the fire was dying down. He'd take care of his chores and head over to the tavern to see if he could find Crandor, or at least get the word out to him that he was done working for him. Late afternoon was usually quiet at the tavern, and today was no different. AMOK ordered a pint of red ale as he sat on a stool at the bar. You know the man who was here the other night with the eye patch? He asked the bartender. Crandor? Yeah, he comes around every now and then, the barkeep replied. Any idea when he'll drop by? Nope. Sometimes spends days without showing up. Why? Tell him AMOK says he's done. I didn't complete the job he hired me to do because he lied to me. I don't like being lied to. Tell him I'll be keeping what he already paid me for my troubles. I'm terminating our contract, AMOK said, downing his pint in one gulp. I don't mind being the messenger, but what do I get for my trouble? AMOK smiled and put 5 bellas in the man's hand. This ought to cover your trouble and the pint. Good night. Amok got up and walked out without looking back. He had a feeling it wasn't going to be that easy turning the page on this episode of his life, but he'd cross that bridge if and when it needed to be crossed. A week had passed since Amok's visit to the alehouse, and he'd almost forgotten about Crandor when a pounding at his door one morning shook him from his slumber. He got up, still groggy, and nearly froze his toes as his feet touched the floor. The fire had consumed the log he'd thrown into the fireplace late last night. The pounding resumed. Whoever was on the other side of the door sounded insistent, and there were few things that irritated Amok more than being awakened this early in a frosty hut. He fully intended to give the knocker a piece of his mind upon opening said door. Amok peered through the small peephole and saw only a large bearded man blocking his view. He pulled the door open with caution, sword in hand, ready to fight. "What do you want, waking me this early in the morning?" Amok said, the rising sun nearly blinding him. "My master's got a bone to pick with you," the oversized bearded man said. He stood a full foot taller than Amok. The large man finally moved out of the way to let Amok take notice of who the man was referring to. There were 3 other men on horses about 5 paces behind the large bearded man. One of them he instantly recognized as Crandor. He wasn't alone on his horse. He sat behind a woman, his left arm around her waist, his right hand holding a gleaming knife to her throat. "Good morning, thief," Crandor said. "You thought you could just change the terms of our deal without my consent." "I didn't change it. I terminated it," Amok said, addressing Crandor. Then he spoke to the lady with the knife at her throat. "Have no fear, Lanka. I won't let them hurt you." The giant bearded man took 2 steps toward Amok, and Amok immediately raised his leg and dealt him a solid kick to the belly. It sent the tall man tumbling backward to land on his behind. Crandor's other 2 acolytes jumped off their horses and came rushing at Amok. He took out 2 throwing stars he'd saved from his encounter with the ninjas and put his knife-throwing skills to good use, spinning a first star at the bigger of the 2 incoming men. It lodged itself firmly into the man's neck, putting him out of commission as he crashed to the ground. Amok whirled the second star at the second man, who barely dodged it. The fiend raised his sword, yelling as he was about to clash with Amok, but Amok rolled on the ground, positioning himself strategically just as his attacker's calves came within reach of his sword. He cleaved the man's right Achilles tendon, sending him to collapse to the cold snow with a scream of agony. As Amok got back on his feet, so did the giant bearded man. "Finish him!" Crandor roared from behind Amok. The giant gritted his teeth and, devoid of any weapon, lunged at Amok. Amok spun around and did a whole 360-degree turn to land a blow to the giant's face with the hilt of his sword. The giant shook his head as Amok twirled his sword in the air. He went for the kill, gripping the sword with both hands like a mallet, and brought it down as the giant's outstretched hands reached to strangle him. The giant caught Amok's sword between his oversized hands, smiling in victory. "Don't celebrate too soon," Amok warned as he let go of the sword and ducked out of the way to his left. The giant's momentum made him run past Amok and caught him off guard. This is when Amok produced the 3rd and last throwing star from his belt. As the giant slowly turned around to face him, Amok aimed and threw the deadly steel weapon at his foe. It hit its mark and destroyed the giant's nose. He yelped in pain as he dropped to his knees, holding his shattered nose. Amok picked up his sword with both hands and charged toward the fallen giant, hammering the blade smack into the top of the bearded man's skull 2 inches deep, turning it into a geyser of blood. Amok put his right foot on the man's left shoulder to help him pull his sword out of the giant's fractured skull. The colossus plummeted face first into the snow. "Impressive, barbarian. If you think I'll let you get anywhere near me with that sword of yours, you're sorely mistaken. I'll pop this wench's beautiful head clean off before you get 1 step closer," Crandor threatened. The sun had attained a choice spot in the morning sky, having fully risen since Crandor's arrival on Amok's doorstep. Amok decided to use it to his advantage as he held his sword, rotating it ever so slightly in order to have the blade reflect sunlight and blind Crandor on the same occasion. The one-eyed man caught a flash of the sun bouncing off of Amok's sword and, as a reflex, raised the arm holding the dagger at Lanka's throat to shield his good eye. She didn't think twice and sank her nails into Crandor's arms at her waist and broke free of his grasp. She bounded off the horse and ran straight to Amok's open arms without looking back. "Good girl," he said, holding her tight against him with his left arm, while his sword hand clasped the cold steel in a defensive fashion. "Take your men and get out of my sight, Crandor. If I ever cross paths with you again, I swear you'll come out of our encounter blind or just plain dead." The man whose Achilles tendon had been sliced limped to his horse, while the one who'd received a throwing star in the neck crawled to his. They left the bearded giant behind in a pool of his own blood. "This isn't the last you'll hear from me, Amok. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Your life won't be worth living. There's no place where you'll be safe from this point forward," Crandor said as he and his 2 lackeys were getting ready to leave. "Talk is cheap, Crandor. Wherever and whenever you'll strike next, I'll be ready for you," Amok said, spitting in the snow in anger. Lanka and Amok watched as the 3 riders galloped away, eventually disappearing in the distance. Lanka threw her arms around Amok, and he squeezed her tight in return. She was shivering, and he was getting pretty cold himself. "Come, let's go inside. I'll clean up this mess later," he said, staring at the dead giant in the snow. "At least you'll have the giant's horse to get back home." They walked into Amok's shack, and he threw 2 big logs into the fireplace. "It'll be warm in no time." "You're covered in bruises and cuts. What happened to you?" she asked. "Everything hurts," he said, half smiling. "Last week, I fought a giant bear, 3 ninjas, and a samurai. I'm glad I came out unscathed from today's battle." "I don't really know what ninjas and samurai are, but it sounds like you've had your hands full. Let me take care of you. You've saved me twice in the 2 times we've met. It's my turn to tend to your injuries." Lanka cleaned and bandaged Amok's multiple wounds as the temperature in the room grew warmer. When she was done, she held his face in her hands and stared him in the eyes. "Thank you for taking care of me." "It's the least..." "Thank you for taking care of me," Amok whispered. "It's the least I can do," she said as she leaned closer to him and to kiss him on the mouth. "There's something I want in return, though." Amok looked at her as she got up and unclasped the straps of her garments. They fell to the floor. She wore nothing underneath. He could see the beautiful curves of her body in the dancing sunlight that came through the window and the shimmering light of the fireplace. Her long black hair unfurled over her generous breasts. Her sex was hidden behind a little tuft of hair. The sight of her nakedness sent bolts of energy throughout his entire body as he felt the organ between his legs stiffen. "Take me," she said. Amok wasn't going to have to be told again. He got up and began showering her body with kisses, licking her nipples as he caressed her warm and smooth skin. He slowly made his way to the wet spot between her legs, giving it generous licks that made her shut her eyes in ecstasy. He laid her on the bed and continued to enjoy her. She grabbed him by the chin and motioned for him to lie down next to her. He did, and it was her turn to explore every inch of his body, kissing and licking him all over with her skillful tongue. When she arrived at the hard length between his legs, she wrapped her mouth voraciously around it, worshipping it until he moaned with pleasure. When he thought he couldn't take it anymore and was about to burst, she pulled her mouth away and straddled him. Amok gently squeezed her breasts in his large hands as she bopped up and down, providing him with exquisite delights. They moaned in unison for long stretches of time, switching positions where he took her from behind, grabbing her by the hair as he thrust into her. They exploded in bliss almost at the same time, Lanka following him a few seconds after he'd felt a massive heavenly release. They lay in bed, silent in each other's arms for a while until they passed out from exertion. They woke mid-afternoon and shared a generous lunch that Amok prepared for them. "I'll be leaving for a while," Amok said as they finished their plates. "Where to? Is it because of Crandor?" He shook his head. "No, I've been planning to go at winter's end. I'm going to head out to a sorceress friend of mine, and then I'll be on my way. I have some questions that need answers far beyond this land." "I understand," she said, holding his hand across the table. "I'll be back for you if you still want me upon my return," Amok said. "Can't I come with you? There's nothing for me here." "It's too dangerous. The road ahead is fraught with peril, and I'll be journeying into the unknown. I have no idea where it'll take me. I've already waited too long to get going." She nodded. They cleaned the table, took care of the dirty dishes, and Lenka got dressed to leave. It was much warmer than it had been at dawn when Crandor and his men had come knocking. "Thanks again for everything you did for me," she said as she held him one last time. To be fair, the second time around, you were collateral damage. It's because of me that you found yourself in that deplorable position." "I'm glad it happened. It led to a good time," she said, winking and smiling mischievously.
"That it did," Amok smiled in return. "It's a moment I won't soon forget. Thank you."
"I wanted it just as much as you." "Will you be okay to ride back?" She glanced at the pale horse next to Melric. "I'll be just fine. That stallion is just as big as its former owner," she said. They laughed. "What will you do about him?" Lenka pointed at the dead giant in the now melting snow. Don't worry about it. He's not the first man I've had to dispose of. I'll get that taken care of. Pack my things and I'll be on my way." "Safe travels, Amok. Look me up when you get back. I'll probably still be around."
"Take care of yourself and stay safe." With those words, Lanka hopped on the large stallion and was on her way. Amok went back inside to get a burning log and lit the corpse on fire to burn it down. "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust," he said. Then he packed some food and only the necessary items he needed, slid on his gauntlet and chainmail vest, and strapped his scabbard and sword over his shoulder. He took one last glance at his surroundings before mounting Melric. "Ready for a new adventure, old boy?" Elsewhere. Crandor had traveled to his master's sanctuary, a majestic citadel far away beyond the dark mountain. Statues erected in the name of his master surrounded the giant halls of the temple. They were rumored to have been built by the great old ones. As Crandor entered the large hall that led to his master's chamber, dozens of cloaked figures ambled around. It was almost time for the ceremony. Crandor walked hesitantly toward the throne at the far end of the chamber. Atop it, another robed figure sat motionless with a scepter in one hand. The high chair was made of human bones and leather. Its owner and the ruler of these parts wore a dark purple cloak covering his body from head to toe. Only his long, crooked nose could be seen peeking out from under his cloak. Crandor walked along the path made of human skulls and kneeled before his master. "My lord."
The cloaked figure stared at him in silence for a moment before speaking.
"What news do you bring me, faithful servant?"
Crandor pursed his lips before speaking. He was terrified of what awaited him.
I was unable to retrieve the katana from Kobayashi." "Didn't you send a warrior to get it for you?"
"Yes, but he didn't bring it back."
"Didn't or wouldn't?"
"Wouldn't. He disposed of the 3 ninjas and must have shared words with Kobayashi. The samurai is still alive according to my spies, and Amok left without getting hold of the katana. He terminated our agreement and killed one of my best men while gravely injuring 2 others.
"And he let you live?"
"I managed to get away, yes."
"Lucky."
"Yes." Crandor's entire body shook with fright. The cloaked man rubbed his chin before speaking further.
"This Amok intrigues me. We'll have to keep a close eye on his whereabouts."
"He's left Zebulon and is traveling due west, but we've lost track of him," Crandor said sheepishly.
"I'm already aware of that. Have no fear. I have eyes everywhere. Our paths will cross again soon."
Crandor nodded. "I'll make him pay for what he's done the next time I see him." The shrouded man laughed a sinister laugh that sent shivers down Crandor's spine.
"You'll do nothing. He's a rare breed of man. A mere mortal like you could not harm him. No, he'll come to me in due time."
"What about the katana?" The cloaked man waved a hand in dismissal.
"There'll be other opportunities. Kobayashi won't live forever."
"Is there anything else you need from me, my lord?"
"No, you're free to go, for now." I trust you'll join us for the ceremony. Of course, my lord. Good. There'll be many virgins on the altar tonight. Wine will flow and food will fill banquet tables. I look forward to it, my lord. Thank you for having me. Crandor got up and was about to leave when the cloaked lord addressed him one last time. Don't think that I'll sweep your failure under the rug so easily, though. Everyone deserves the benefit of the doubt. After all, you were facing no ordinary men. The cloaked figure rose from his throne and pointed a long, skinny finger at Crandor. The next time you come up short, though, you won't be able to grovel your way to my forgiveness. Understood? Crandor nodded 3 times swiftly. Yes, my lord. I'm grateful for your clemency. Crandor left the chamber, and the cloaked man sat down again. A devious smile slowly etched itself upon his face. Wander all you want, AMOK. All roads lead to the Harbinger of Doom. The end. For now. Well, this is it. The reading of episode 1 of AMOK the Powerful. The complete story is 8 episodes. It chronicles the quest of AMOK, trying to seek answers about his past, along with his friend Goyiir, and a couple of friends joining them along the way. They'll face many foes, many perils. So yeah, if you want to read the rest, you'll have to pick up the book. It's available on Kindle or in print. You can find all the details on my blog, bitternest.blogspot.com. You can find me on Twitter, X. Just look for Alan Draven. I'm also on Blue Sky. I hope you enjoyed this reading. It wasn't my best. I'm a little rusty. Haven't done this in a while. I screwed up a little bit towards the end, but hey, that's the challenge of doing a live reading. I love doing them. Maybe one day I'll do a proper recording and release the first episode as a recording, like edited with no screw ups or anything. But I wanted to do a live reading for fun like that. So that's it for me. See you around on the web, and if you pick up the book, drop me a line. Let me know if you liked it, and if you want to leave a review on Amazon or Goodreads, that's always very much appreciated. So bye for now.